Hey, fellow mathers. Before we get into this episode, we want to share with you how you can get access to free content, professional learning that will keep your students engaged and doing the math that matters. Get ready to go to this link, mathisfigureoutable.com/challenge.
That's right. Registration is open for the free Math is Figureoutable Challenge that's starting May 15th and runs to the 17th at 7 p.m. Central. We're going to have 3 nights jam-packed with learning and routines that you can take straight to your classroom.
In these challenges, we have a great time. We do some math, talk about classroom experiences, give away super cool bonuses and prizes. You won't just walk away with routines that are naturally engaging and encourage your students to think mathematically. You'll also have a chance to win over $6K worth in prizes, including a few virtual PD sessions for your school. I'll be joined by my wonderful co-host Kim and special guest Jenna Labe.
You can register at mathisfigureoutable.com/challenge for a fantastic learning experience. That's mathisfigureoutable.com/challenge. Now on to the show.
Hey, fellow mathematicians. Welcome to the podcast where math is figureoutable. I'm Pam Harris.
And I'm Kim Montague.
And you found a place where math is not about memorizing and mimicking, waiting to be told or shown what to do, but it's about making sense of problems, noticing patterns, and reasoning using mathematical relationships. We can mentor students to think and reason like mathematicians do. Not only are algorithms not particularly helpful in teaching mathematics, but rotely repeating steps actually keeps students from being the mathematicians they can be.
So we have some longtime listeners, but I want to have a special welcome to the parents who are tuning in this week.
Welcome.
Last week, that's really special, right?
We appreciate it. You bet.
For your students. So welcome to the parents. Last week we started talking about some parent tips and some little activities and routines that you can do with your student in teeny tiny bits of time that we know make a huge impact. And so if you didn't tune in to the last episode 170, we'd encourage you to check that one out as well. And so if you listened to that episode and you thought, man, they talk fast and they said a lot, we would highly encourage you to check out that free download that we shared last week. And we'll mention again today. You can find that at mathisfigureoutable.com/parent tips. One word, parent tips. Today, we're going to share some more tips and activities that you can do to help build mathematicians in your home.
We love active parents, parents who care about their kids, parents who dive in and really want the best for their students. And we honor the fact that you are here. So Let's get right at some tips that we have to work with your students. So a couple of general tips to start with. Kim, let's talk about one of the most interesting things you and I find is that when we are interacting with kids, maybe at church or on the ball field or in a store, not our own, and we ask them a question, we often find that parents dive in super fast.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's almost like they'll say things like, you know that one, we've learned that, we've practiced that, and I want to just like say, it's okay, it's all right, let him think. Let him think. It's not about retrieving from rote memory. It's not about, can I find that in my memory banks? It's really more, how are you thinking about that? So if a kid has to think about it a little bit, I'm okay with that. I'm going to wait a little bit longer. So parents, our first tip for the day, wait a little bit longer for responses to math questions. Maybe to any questions, but for sure math questions. Give them a chance to think. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, it tells them that you value their thinking, right? You're not going to interrupt their thinking. And so I'll say, Pam, that when we are waiting, we're not talking into that space either, right? We're not trying to direct it. We're not trying to give them too many hints or clues. We are big fans of, do you need time or help? It's a huge question. And a lot of times, most kids just need a little bit more time. And when we rush in, we're not giving them the actual help that they need. So the next one that I want to mention.
Before you go on, can I also suggest that if I were looking at Kim's face right now while she was working with a kid, giving that kid that time, she would have a look on her face of intense interest. What it wouldn't be would be, come on, you can do it. Like kind of this wavy thing. Like, I'm impatient. Like Like it's about speed. It's about snapping. It's like fast. It wouldn't be but how else do I
It's
describe
not
what?
impatient.
Yeah, it's very patient. It's very interested. It's very like sometimes we'll kind of crinkle our brow and we'll kind of look kind of like this is
Why don't you
hard.
know this? Yeah.
Yeah, like we give him the like this. You're thinking good. I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking like we're
Mm-hmm.
both thinking here. It's kind of the thinking face. It's not the expectation face. It's also not yeah, just the impatient face. It's kind of just like, yeah, hey, let's think about this. Kind of let's put some weight on the fact that we're thinking. So we're
Yeah.
waiting and we're putting weight. We're allowing there to be a little time. Y'all, we're not suggesting that we want your kids to be slow. We're suggesting that it's okay for them to think. There's a
Right.
difference. Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
Along with that, while you're waiting, we want to resist the urge to tell the right answer. And if you grew up in a world where the answer was everything, which I think a lot of us did,
Mm-hmm.
then you might feel the urge to supply the answer, assume that means they now own it, and move on, which is not what we believe.
We'll see a lot of parents, I'll say something like, hey, do you know 34 plus 10? And the kid will kind of, wait a little bit and the parent will go 44. All right, now you know. And I'm like,
Mhm.
just because the kid heard 44 doesn't
Yeah.
mean that the kid now owns. Like if I'm messing with 34, I don't know if that's the best problem, Kim. But if I'm asking 34 plus 10, or maybe a better example is if I said 34 plus 10 and the student said 44, haha, I know that. And then I said, well, what's 34 plus 9?
Hmm.
And the kid waits a little bit and the parent goes, well, it's 43. Like
It's just
tell
one less. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, okay. Now the kid, yeah, or just one less. Now the kid owns it, right? Or yeah, in that moment, we don't want to steal the chance for the kid to grapple with that relationship.
Right.
We don't want to take away the opportunity for the kid to consider, can I use plus 10 to help me with plus 9? Huh. What would that let me grind that. Let me create that path in my head that then the next time it comes up, I had that one time path. And boy, if I travel that again, it'll be a stronger path. And boy, then if I travel that again, it'll be an even stronger neural path. That then when I hit things like that, I have these paths that I've created. If you just pop in an answer, I don't get a chance to create that neural pathway.
Hmm. Yeah. And that's what we want.
That's what we
Denseness,
want.
right?
Yeah, we want dense,
Richness about,
rich, rich brains, dense brains, lots of
yeah.
neural pathways in brains.
Yeah. Last week, we alluded to this a little bit, but when you're working with your student on any of these routines or game like situations, important questions to ask would be, what do you know? When they say, I don't know, you can say, what do you know? And relate to something that you know that they know. You could say, how do you know? Or how did you do that? And then intensely listen with curiosity. You could ask, does that always work? Having kids verbalize their thinking can be super powerful to cementing that thinking in their own brain. And it's super fun to share about ways that we're learning and sharing strategies because then you're open to additional ways of thinking about it.
Yeah, super cool. Kim, do we have time for me to give a quick example?
Sure.
So when you said, what do you know? I think this often comes with parents. I'll see it often with facts. Do we want kids to know their facts? Absolutely. We want them at their fingertips. We want them to have facility with those facts. But how they get them is not really through rote memorization. So I might ask a student, or you might ask your student something like 8 times 7. That's an often missed fact. If a kid's going to miss a fact, they might miss 8 times 7. And when you ask a kid, you're like, okay, come on. So first we're going to pause, right? We're going to give them some time, wait a little bit longer. We're going to resist the urge to tell the right answer. And when a kid says, I don't know, then we might say, well, what do you know? Do you know some 8s? Do you know some 7s? We're trying to find 8 times 7. Do you know some 7s? Do you know some 8s? What do you know? And then if a kid says, well, I know 5/8, then we might say, well, how do you know that? Well, I know my 5s, or I know 10 times 8, so I can find 5 times 8. So asking, or if a student says, let's see, 48, 56, then we might go, oh, like, what were you just doing? How do you know that? What were you thinking about for the 48? Oh, well, I was thinking about 8 times 6. So I just need one more 7 to get, wait, I need one more 8. I don't usually use that one. So if I know 6/8 is 48, then I can do 7/8 would be one more 8. We want kids to have to like I just did. I had to think about my own thinking there. We want kids to verbalize things like that when they are using relationships like that. And then that last question, does it always work? When a student says, "Well, yeah, I just added one more group," you could say, "Can you always do that?" Like if you're looking for 8 9s and you know 7 9s, can you just add one more 9? Or if you're looking for 11 12s and you know 10 12s, can you just add one more 12? Does that always work that you can just add one more group when you're only one group less? That kind of generalizing is hugely important for students to kind of cement relationships. And it works towards algebraic reasoning, which they're going to do later in higher grades.
So another suggestion that we would make is to play games with your students. So we are Pam and I are both a big board game loving
Mm-hmm.
kind of people. And there's some fantastic games out there that we highly recommend to build all kinds of things with students. But we're also going to dive in now to a couple of other routines that we would love. Pam, you want to say anything about games?
I'll just say it doesn't have to be a math game. It could be any
Right.
game. But there's something about board games, something about kids
Card
having
games.
card games. In those games, if there's a mathy thing that happens, say it out loud.
Mhm.
A real simple one. You're playing one of those. You just move your piece along the board, and you notice there's a pattern on the board, like Monopoly. And so like you're supposed to go so many spaces, and you just know how many they are, and so you skip ahead to it because you're like, well, if I go to the I can't think now the railroad, then it's just gonna be one past that. Or I know that if I've it's supposed to be 10 and I'm getting 11, it's just gonna be one over the edge because I was right here. When you think about those moves in the game, think about it out loud. Just say out loud how you're thinking about that little mathy thing in the middle of the game. Could be a way to start the conversation about what's happening in your brain. You might say, "Pam, everybody knows that's what's happening in my brain." Oh, actually, you might be surprised. I didn't as a kid. I would watch people do that as a kid, and I was like, I don't even know what they're doing. Oh well. And then I would just because it wasn't talk aboutable with whoever I
Mhm.
was playing, and so I didn't ask. But oh, I wish people would have said more of that out loud, so I could have started making those relationships more.
Yeah. Okay, so one thing we would recommend parents do with their students from a very early age is count forward and back from numbers other than one, right? So really young kids can sing song 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pretty early on. But the idea that you start with 16 or 24 and count on is a huge skill. But then also, even more difficult than that is counting backwards from numbers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Like choose random numbers
Hmm.
and say, hey, today we're going to count on from 13. Go 13, 14, and just start counting forward. But then say, today we're going to count backwards. Start from the nice 10 and count backwards. And start from the nice 20 and count backwards. But someday say, we're going to start counting backwards from 13. Go. Bam.
I
If you
mean,
have
it
an
doesn't have
older,
to be by ones, right? Counting forward and
yes, keep
backwards.
going.
Yep, by tens, 23, 43, 53, 63. Talking about the place value in that, what's actually happening when you count forwards by tens. What happens to the tens place? What happens to the ones place? Once you've gotten some experience with counting forwards and backwards by tens or by hundreds from strange numbers, what happens when you count forwards by nine? What does that do to the tens place and the one place? So you're talking about the value of numbers as they're doing this small routine.
Yeah, it's super, super helpful. For younger kids, you can also count by twos, but don't just count by twos starting from zero.
Right.
Start with 3 and count by twos. Start with 11 and count by twos. You can start with 16 and count by twos, and then start with 26 and count by twos backwards. So yeah, lots of things that you can do. Kim, I used to do that going up and down stairs. So
Yeah.
somehow for me, that was like a ping with my kids that as we climbed stairs, I'd be like, okay, say we're on 15. Ready? We're going to count by fives. 15, 20. And then on the way down, I was like, okay, now we're on, I don't even know, 73. And we're going to count back by fives. Oh, that was a
Yeah, it was
slower.
a
That was a
yeah.
slower. Okay, maybe I didn't actually do that one. Usually stairs we did
But you
easier,
could. Yeah.
easier. But you could. Oh, if I
Yeah.
would have done it more, we could have done it even more. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Cool.
All right. What about guess my number?
Ooh, love it, love
Oh
it.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so guess my number in my family is where I think of a number and my kids can ask me yes or no questions about that number. And so I might be thinking of the number 68. Generally start with numbers under 100 for quite some time. So I think about the number 68 and they might say to me, is your number odd? Yes or no? Okay, well, if I know it's odd, yes or no, then I don't have to ask if it's even, but sometimes they do early on. Is it less than 100? Does it have a six in the ones place? Is it a prime or composite number? Is it a multiple of a certain number? And so they're gathering information about the number based on the questions they're asking,
Mhm.
until they determine what the number is.
Yeah, it's super cool. A slightly simplified version of that that I like to play first with kids is I might say, I'm thinking of a number, and then they would just guess. So I'll say, I'm thinking of a number between 0 and 100, and they guess, it's funny how random they guess, 33. And I'll say, my number's higher than 33. And I want to play this game often enough to where kids finally start to go, 50 is their first guess. Like
Mhm.
cut it in half, because now if they guess 50, they've cut out half the numbers and they can, it's for sure in that other half. So don't tell them that though. Play with them often enough that along the line, somebody goes, well, I think 50 is a good guess. And so
Mhm.
then I'll say my number's higher than 50. And then I hope they'll come back and say 75. And then I'll say my number's lower than 75. And then I hope they'll come back and try to go in between 50 and 75. Now that takes a while for them to kind of get that, but boy, when they do, they own that idea that if I can sort of cut the what's left, the span in half, then I've cut out half the numbers. I can guess between the numbers that are left. So that's a little bit of a simplified version, maybe for younger kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can make those numbers much bigger. I can have the range 0 to 1,000 and guess my number in between there. Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say both versions of that are very much about the richness of the number and its approximation and about its uh,
It's
what it comes
place.
between
Yeah.
its place. Yeah. So
Neighborhood.
yeah. Speaking of its place,
Mm.
we also are really big fans of talking about the value of number rather than its digits,
Hmm.
right? So kids might be really used to in early years saying the number uh, 391 is about, we'd love for them to know it's 391, but also talking about what it means in terms of other views. So it could also be, if I said the number 391, it is 391, but it's also 200 and 191. It's
Nice.
also 39 tens and one.
And it's also 9 away from 400. It's 400
Yeah,
minus 9.
right,
Absolutely.
right,
And let me just really point out that every time Kim just said the number 391, she never said 391.
right.
So often we say numbers as digits and we don't talk about the values that are happening. So if you're saying the number 1,236, it's okay to say 1,236. It's okay to say 1,236, but try not to say 1,236.
Yeah.
Like just calling it digits. And then like Kim said, all the different kind of ways that you could talk about that number flexibly, like that helps kids think about what it's near. It helps kids place that number and think about magnitudes, the size of numbers. Yeah, it's totally cool. Nice.
Okay, go ahead.
Another one I was going to mention, we're going to a little higher math here, is that when you're talking about fractions, so if you're talking about a fraction like 4/5, the name that we give 4/5 in English is 4/5, but it also means 4/1/5. Like the fraction 4/5. If you only learn fractions and a part whole relationship, the way we typically have taught, when I say 4/5, you might be thinking, oh, that's 4 line 5. And you might only be thinking about 4 out of 5. And
Right.
to do that, you're only thinking about 4, you're thinking about 5, and maybe you're shading some pizza pieces or something. But we want kids to think about 4/5 as 4/1/5. That
Right.
if I can think of something cut into 5 equal shares and I call that a fifth, then 4/1/5, 4/5 is 4 of those 1/5.
Right.
So similarly, if I had, I'm trying to think of another fraction, 2/7, then I want to think of that as 2/1/7.
Which
Or if I had
meaning a seventh and a seventh, right? It's
exactly, yes. I've got a seventh there and a seventh there, and so I've got 2 of those 1/7, then I
right.
can call those 2/7. And similarly, if I had 3/8, then I could say I've cut something into 8 equal shares. I've got 8 equal pieces, and I have 3 of those 1/8. 3/1/8 is the same thing as 3/8. You might be surprised how much clarity that can bring to some fractions when you call those mixed numbers, a phrase, when you call those fractions by what we call the unit fraction, by the one piece, how many of that one piece you have.
And a
Cool.
small tweak to that is that
Mm,
you would hear both of us say 4/5 about as much as we would say 4/1/5. So when we're
yeah.
describing the fraction 4/5, we also will say, "Oh, you have 4/1/5."
Yeah, so it's not like we give up one name for the other because they're going to
Right.
hear 4/5 in common usage and everything, and 4/5 is
Right.
fine. We just need the meaning of 4/1/5 as well, so we just often say both of them. Yeah,
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
you say? Yep, totally cool.
While you're talking about fractions, what about comparing fractions?
Oh yeah. So often when we get to comparing fractions, this is if kids haven't been taught a lot of rules up to this point, almost always there comes these funny like butterfly, these things are not
Mhm.
mathematical, these weird. So when you're comparing fractions, consider that you can compare them to landmarks. So when I just said 4/5, if I've got 4/1/5, 5/1/5 would make the whole, right? I'd have the whole candy bar. If I had 4 of those 1/5, I'm almost to the whole. So I
Mhm.
can sort of use that 4/1/5, that idea of being so close to that landmark one whole. I can use that to help me think about comparing it to something like 6/5. So if
Mhm.
I'm thinking about 6/1/5, 6/1/5, wait, 5/5 is the whole thing. 5/1/5, I've got the whole thing. So I've got 6 of them. Well, I've got more than the candy bar. Well, right there, if I'm comparing 4/5 and 6/5, I can just think about how those both compare to 5/5. I don't have to do any fancy butterfly, cross
Right.
multiply, cross cancel, like whatever all these rules are. Compare to a landmark. Kim, what if I was comparing something like 4/1/5 to 2/1/5? How do I have some sense of, oh, maybe that one's almost too easy. Let me do 4/5 and ooh, Pam thinking live here. And no,
Two
that's not gonna work.
sevenths.
Thank you. You knew
So
where I
if
was going.
I knew you were going to ask. So if I understand that 4/5 means 4/1/5, then I can think about where's halfway. Like 4/5 is more than half of the fifths, and 2/7. I only have two of the sevenths. That's less than half of the sevenths. So if I have one fraction that's more than a half and one that's less than a half, that's usually very helpful to compare them. So
To
four
compare them.
fifths would be bigger. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. And I could have even done something like 4/17.
Hmm.
So now the fours are the same. I've got 4/117 and I've got 4/1/5. And so now I can, no, that's probably, I just left the 1/2, didn't I? That's not what I
Yeah.
meant to do.
But
Kim, I
there's
was
lots of
trying,
ways to compare with meaning, I think is the point, right? There's lots of ways to compare
absolutely. Yes,
meaning
we'll
rather
stay
than
there.
some rote memorized things. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're thinking about fractions, see if you can use that unit fraction, that one share, the 1/5,
Hmm.
the 1/7, the 1/15, to help you reason about more of that one share, the 5/7, and the 6/15, and that could be helpful in reasoning about how close that fraction is to a landmark fraction. Cool. All right, y'all. One of the most frequent questions that we get from parents is, do you have all this stuff written down that we can refer to? Well, we just listened to your podcast, but how are we supposed to have all this in our back pocket? Well, the answer is yes. We have a tip sheet for parents. It's a free download. It lists the things that we've talked about and more, and it has links to learn more about many of them. You can get it all at mathisfigureoutable.com/parent tips. To get our free download, click on the link or click. You can't. Well, you could click on the link in the show notes or go to mathisfigureoutable.com/parent tips. And don't worry, it's totally free. Parents, picture a day when you have more confidence talking math with your child. Picture a day when you are sharing your ideas and wonders and your student is intrigued and sharing with you too. Picture a day when your child says, it's cool that math is figure outable and we talk about it in our family. For help to make that happen, download our parents tip sheet at mathisfigureoutable.com/parent tips. Y'all, thanks for tuning in and teaching more and more real math. To find out more about the Math is Figureoutable movement, visit mathisfigureoutable.com. Let's keep spreading the word that math is figureoutable. Thank you for listening and making math more figureoutable.
To learn even more, make sure you register for our free challenge at mathisfigureoutable.com/challenge. You are not going to want to miss the evenings of May 15th through 17th, starting at 7 p.m. Central.
Math teaching, go register now. That's mathisforgettable.com/challenge. Join us to make math more and more figure outable. And if you can't join live, register and we'll send you access to the recordings. We'll see you there.